Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. It's, you never know the first snowfall of the season how hardy we really are as Minnesotans. But I knew that we would get people out regardless of the weather for a lot of different reasons. One, just to prove how tough we are as Minnesotans. But second of all, because this is such an exciting conversation that we're about to commence with the community to really look at, I think, such a unique opportunity to do something in the Midway District that has the potential to spur a lot of economic development, a lot of activity, take advantage of a lot of the things that we have already invested in the city of St. Paul and in this district in particular. Obviously, the light rail line has been an unbelievable investment in our community. Ridership projections that are already, matching projections for 2020, 2030, and beyond. Well beyond, we knew that the ridership on the Green Line was going to be strong, but I don't think that even our most hopeful, projections were as strong as they were, and it's going to continue to grow. We have the A line that will be opening up in 2016. That will be the first true bus rapid transit line in the Twin City area that I think is going to really just usher in a whole new era of how we do transportation investments in this community, connect us, this area directly to South Minneapolis, to Highland Park, out to Roseville, and ultimately beyond that. So that's a very exciting opportunity as well. We're just thrilled. Well, one of the things that we said when we really started to make those investments in transportation was it wasn't just about moving people from point A to point B. It was really about building community. And that's what's so exciting about this opportunity to have soccer here in the Midway District in the city of St. Paul. First of all, this I think is a real victory for the region because for a couple of reasons. First of all, soccer is the world's game. With our increasingly diverse community, to have soccer in the Twin Cities is important. We have seen the success of it. You have 9,400 people going out to games out in Blaine. You can't even get out to Blaine, so how you get out there for those games, I'm not even sure. But when you think about having a stadium that has access to the incredible transportation network that we're building here in the city of St. Paul, it's very exciting to think about. One of the goals that I have, and I think is going to be really important, is to really figure out how we develop a plan to have as many people taking public transportation or biking or walking to the stadium as possible. The more people that we have taking public transportation to games and to the businesses that are already in this neighborhood, the businesses that will come as a result of the development, the better off we are. I think it's going to be great if we can really maximize that opportunity. We've seen that happen in other communities, Portland and other cities that do have the kind of transportation network at their stadium like we have, and I think we can really max it. I have to say that it is no small thing that I am particularly excited about the fact that this upwards of $120 million investment is a privately funded investment. That has never happened before. It's certainly not happened in this region. It may have happened in a couple of other places across the country. But for an ownership group to come in and say, we will cover the cost of the stadium, we will cover the cost of the capital maintenance, we will cover all cost overruns, is a really unique proposition. And so it is just, I think, so exciting to have that in this area and to have that kind of investment. We're going to hear a little bit more about the particulars of what we're talking about in terms of the deal points. You're going to hear from some of the city folks that will talk about kind of what we see the planning process is going forward. We're going to talk a little bit more about the work of tonight and the tables that we have set up for conversations, and that's going to be a critical point. Obviously, we have all this is possible because we have a great city council that understands the opportunity that we have here. We have Council President Russ Stark. Ward 1 City Council Member Di Tao. Ward 3 City Council Member Chris Tolbert. And thank you all for being here. So later on, I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to interact with all three of them. If any other council members show up, feel free to grab them. But at this point, I just want to emphasize that the point of this planning process of the technical advisory committee that really begins its work later this week, and we'll have meetings every couple of weeks going forward. The real important part of our conversations here with the district council and with community groups and the Midway Business Association is to really dream about the possibilities. What can we use to maximize this opportunity? What can we, how do we take advantage of this investment of over $120 million of private resources into our community? We have seen what can happen when we do this right. Think about what happened in Lowertown. CHS Field didn't change, didn't drive all the activity down in Lowertown. But what it did was it was nestled into a neighborhood that was already developing, that was already getting a lot of excitement, that people were investing in, and it really accelerated and emphasized those opportunities. And I think the same thing is true here. I think that this is not about, boy, the Midway District is so, what's going on, we need some investment there. It is, we've already made a lot of investment in this community. People are investing in it, whether it's business owners is along University Avenue, or it's the new project on Selby and Snelling, or it's, whatever the investment that's happening. But I really do believe that when we put the soccer stadium here, and we already see the interest that's occurring in envisioning what Midway Shopping Center can be, and in addition to Midway, other parts of this area. When we start thinking about it, the stadium will be a further catalyst for really developing what I think is going to be one of the premier and exciting districts in the Twin Cities in the years to come. Timeline is great because this is not an open-ended conversation. We're hoping to break ground by summer of next year. So it's important that we focus our conversation over the coming months, that we really hone in on the vision that we as a community have for the site, that we really figure out how we incorporate the stadium itself into that vision, and how we really maximize that opportunity. And so I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for being a part of that conversation. And there's much work to do, but it's a pretty exciting opportunity. So thank you all for participating. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to someone that many of you know that I've worked with over the years in the development of the light rail line, as the head of the Central Corridor Funders Collaborative and others. But now I've been proud to serve as my Planning and Economic Development Director for the last year and a half now. It's got to be at least a year and a half. Jonathan Sage Martinson.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to give us a little sort of orientation to how the meeting's going to go tonight and get us on our way so that we can have lots of time to get your input on a number of pieces. As the mayor said, it's always exciting to dream about a new development or a new configuration of part of our community, and so we're excited to kick off this process tonight of planning for the redevelopment of this Snelling University, the Snelling-Midway site, this 35-acre site. This is the first public meeting. There will be several others in the process of doing this community planning, and we'll get into that in a little bit in terms of what those other opportunities are for public input. Tonight we're going to have this meeting in two parts. We're in about the next 20-25 minutes. We're going to provide some context. So we're going to do some speaking from the podium here, and then the next hour we're going to ask you to provide input around the room. There's, I believe it's 18 tables total around the room. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, but we're going to spend that last hour asking you to weigh in on a whole host of issues that will kind of provide some context in this first 20 minutes or so. So in the first 20 minutes, we're gonna highlight three things. We're gonna talk a little bit about the stadium itself and some of those deal points that the mayor highlight or mentioned that we're gonna be discussed. Secondly, we're gonna talk about the planning that has been done for this site, and we're gonna give an overview of the sort of background work, the background planning that's been done. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about what the process will be to get from today to a finished master plan for the site. And then at that point, we'll break and go out to the tables. So without much further ado, we're going to ask you to hold your questions. The speakers will be around afterwards, and certainly there'll be lots of other city staff at the tables to provide input to or ask questions of. So we're going to start off by talking about the stadium itself, and the city's finance director, Todd Hurley, is going to cover that piece of it, and then the city's planning director, Donna Drummond, will talk about past planning for the site and then the process for going forward. So, Todd?
Good evening. My name is Todd Hurley, and I'm the finance director and treasurer for the city of St. Paul. As far as the stadium deal goes, I will be the staff member of the administration and council who will be leading the city team in negotiations with the Minnesota United on the stadium deal itself. I will also be joined by certain members of the city's, the St. Paul Port Authority, members of Jonathan's group over at Planning and Economic Development, and the City Attorney's Office. I'm here tonight to provide a general overview of the soccer stadium deal, including three key documents that are currently under negotiation with the Minnesota United. Up on the screen, you can see the three agreements we are working on. The first one, again, is called the ground lease. That is a document. That is an agreement we're working on with the city, led by myself, the Port Authority, Met Council, and the Minnesota United. What that is, in very high-level terms, is it's a long-term land lease or ground lease for the 10-acre site commonly known as the bus barn site, which is just adjacent to this property here. The second agreement we're working on with the team is what's called the development agreement. That is an agreement that will be executed between the City of St. Paul and the Minnesota United. And again, what that will involve is really the process during the design and construction of the stadium. And finally, the third agreement to talk about is what we're calling the playing or use agreement. And again, that'll be an agreement executed both by the City of St. Paul and the Minnesota United. And what that entails is really after construction and certificate of occupancy of the stadium, how the relationship between the city and the team will work as far as management of the facility, maintenance of the facility, the use of the facility, and operations of the facility. Just to get into details that we are working on, the first issue to discuss is the land. Again, I talked about that the land is the 10-acre bus barn site adjacent to this property. Again, the city and the Port Authority are working on negotiations with the team and with Met Council to acquire a long-term ground lease for that site. We have already executed what's called a joint powers agreement at the City Council, as did Met Council and as did the Port Authority, to get into negotiations on that land lease. The plan then, after the lease is actually executed between the city and Met Council, is that the City of St. Paul would then assign its rights under the ground lease to the team, who would then in turn on an annual basis pay the entire cost of whatever the annual rent is, either directly to the Met Council or through the City of St. Paul as a conduit. The key being that whatever that cost is of the ground lease over the term of the lease will be funded by the team and pass through the city or directly to the Met Council. So no City of St. Paul costs as far as the ground lease would go. Concepts under the stadium. As Mayor Coleman said, Minnesota United is to design and construct and pay for 100% of the stadium costs. Again, that is very unique to these stadium deals. Hasn't happened in Minnesota, and as the mayor said, has only happened a handful of times across the United States. Some key guiding principles behind what the stadium will need to include. Again, right now we are working with a minimum of $120 million of construction costs. Currently looking at around a 20,000 person seated capacity for the stadium. The stadium will need to be constructed under what is a defined term called Major League Soccer standards. And finally, at the end of the process, the city may own or control, depending on the property tax legislation that will need to be passed for property tax exemption. So the city, if necessary, is willing and is contemplated that we will own the soccer stadium upon completion. Further points in the stadium deal is what the team is going to be responsible in the ongoing arrangement between the city and the team. Again, as the City of St. Paul will in all likelihood own the facility, we need to make sure first that all cost overruns of any of the construction budget are funded by the team. All capital improvements within the stadium will be funded by the team. In addition to that, the operations, maintenance, and any required capital reserves of the stadium also funded by the team. A part of the use agreement will then be that all home games for the Minnesota United will be required to be played at the stadium here in St. Paul. Exceptions that we've talked about is they may move off-site under certain inclement weather conditions or if a game bigger than what the capacity of the stadium can handle is actually scheduled. Some of the things with soccer is you may end up in certain international games, and we need to make clear that there may be a game or so that doesn't get played its home game here. And then finally, as part of what we're negotiating, as the team is responsible for all costs, from construction to operations, maintenance, and capital reserves, the team will then retain all revenues generated from within the stadium. The city's responsibilities in the stadium are by large, the two biggest the things the city is responsible for is for us to use best efforts to support and deliver 2 tax exemptions. And again, we cannot deliver either one of these tax exemptions without legislation passed at the Capitol this session. First one being property tax exemption. Again, the Bus Barn site is currently property tax exempt and has been for the past 50 years. And the second exemption is a construction sales tax exemption. Again, not unlike any of the stadiums built in recent history, from Target Field to US Bank Football Stadium to CHS Field. So again, those are the 2 things the city will be working with the team and with the legislature to make sure that those get adopted. Another important component of any stadium deal would be that the city would lead the master development plan for the entire 34.5 acre site. So not just within the stadium footprint, but the land surrounding the stadium in this area. Again, it was important and during a city council resolution passed unanimously to support the soccer stadium in St. Paul, that we did do a few things that I'll talk about. Again, the majority of this meeting after I am done will be talking about the master development plan. But first, the first thing included in that resolution was that we did get community input. And that we did, and that the mayor and city council would announce that the formation of a task force, which has actually been completed since then. Also in the resolution said that any master development plan of this area must include, but would not be limited to, green spaces, public spaces, roads, the public utilities, stormwater management, and parking. And then finally, as with any other development that the city of St. Paul does, the city would work to facilitate any of the necessary zoning, permits, and other easements required for a successful project over at this site. Finally, a couple other things that are important, I'm sure, to the community, but for sure to city staff, the mayor, and city council, is that we would work with the team to ensure that the following things do happen as part of any stadium deal in St. Paul. First is that the city will work with the team to ensure that there are minority, women, and small business hiring and contracting in accordance with city policies. Second is that we will work to negotiate adequate public use of the stadium, and I believe that's one of the tables that's going to be discussed tonight, and your input will be helpful as we negotiate the use agreement with the team. Thirdly, that we will have an affordable ticket program as part of Major League Soccer in St. Paul, and I know there is a table set up to discuss what the community thinks is an affordable ticket program. And finally, that we'll have support for, through Major League Soccer and the stadium, we'll have support for youth soccer in St. Paul. With that concludes my comments. Donna, are you next? Thank you.
Well, hi, everybody. Again, I'm Donna Drummond. I'm the Director of Planning in the City's Department of Planning and Economic Development, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about the planning work that the city has done to prepare for development all along the Green Line, and especially for this site. Back in 2006, when Mayor Coleman first took office, he recognized that construction of the Green Line was really a great opportunity for a lot of community benefits, and to that end, he asked the Planning Commission to establish a couple of community task forces that put together an overall vision for how the corridor should grow and change into the future for the next 25 or 30 years. So that was put together by those task forces. It was approved by the City Council, adopted as part of the city's comprehensive plan. It's called the Central Corridor Development Strategy. Of course, it wasn't called the Green Line back then, so it was called that. We followed that up then with more community task forces that looked at the areas right around the stations, and we developed station area plans for those areas. So there is a Snelling station area plan that sets a nice sort of framework to look at development in. Then we followed that up with looking at the zoning along the corridor, and we put in place zoning that would then implement the vision and the plans that were developed with community input to make sure that future development matched that vision. Then the most recent thing that's been done was in 2014. It was the city and the Met Council and the owner of the Midway Shopping Center that jointly hired a firm called Urban Investment Group that put together a report on how would we actually start moving forward on developing this whole 35-acre site. That provided a lot of good input, like how do you actually start looking at new streets, utilities, what are some of the costs of that for parking, that type of thing. So that really provided a lot of good background. I'll just go over a couple of the key themes that are from the vision and the stationary plans that sort of set the framework for looking at development here. So these are some of the key principles for new development from the development strategy. So we want to make sure that we're ensuring that development fits the site. So this area, this Midway area between Snelling and Lexington, really is an area that could take a lot of additional growth and development that will help the city provide more jobs, more housing units, more tax base, because it's between University and the freeway, and there's not a lot of residential right next to it. So looking at that potential, and then making sure that we're looking at achieving transit supportive uses and densities. The way we handle parking, making sure that it's to the side of buildings behind, underground, structured, so that development is oriented toward more pedestrians and transit users, and then just creating a more green, attractive, and connected pedestrian environment. Some of the key ideas from the station area plan, it talks about some appropriate building heights, so you can see there we're looking at potentially, and again, you know, this depends on if the market is there to support this kind of development, but we would like to see potentially development 4 to 6 stories, or maybe if the demand is there, some point towers that would be taller. We want transparency and activity at the street level, so building entrances along the public street, large glass frontages so that people can see inside to what's going on and people can also look out, and then wrapping parking structures with active uses. Really looking at expanding sort of the mix of uses that could be built here, so looking at everything from retail, office, entertainment to residential. Again, priority active frontages, where are people walking, especially near the LRT station, making sure those are real pedestrian friendly. Again, handling parking if possible as shared, structured, or below grade. And the idea that was throughout all these stationary plans and the development strategy of new public spaces to orient new development around, that's a key theme of the planning work. Circulation and access, the idea of creating a street grid, new streets that could go through this. These are kind of really big blocks between the freeway or St. Anthony and University. So putting in some new streets to make it easier to walk through, to drive through, more development frontages, that was another key theme. Just making improved streetscape and pedestrian amenities. And this is just an image from the stationary plan that gives you some idea. This is the general 35 acres we're talking about, so the idea of putting in some streets. So it's not intended to be prescriptive, but the concept is there. Most of you probably know the property very well, but here is the bus barn site, the 10 acres, and then this is the balance of the site. So together that's about 35 acres. All of this, the 25 acres here are under one ownership, Midway. So there's going to be 2 pieces we'll be working on, a site plan for the soccer stadium and then also a master plan for the whole almost 35 acres. And I think the goal of everyone is to make sure that there's a coordinated redevelopment of both the stadium, and it fits well with any potential new development that happens here. We want to make sure that we're creating a transit-oriented, walkable, new urban neighborhood. And again, I think the idea is to look at phased development over time. There's a lot of existing businesses here in the Midway Shopping Center, and I think the idea is to work with those businesses and look at a transition over time. So the review and community and decision-making process, community engagement, obviously you're here. This is one of the first public meetings. I think we're going to have a couple more. We have a community advisory committee that's been appointed. We had a record, I think, 210 applicants for that committee. They've been appointed and their first meeting is later this week, so we'll get started with that. And their goal is to really be a focal point for providing community input as the design teams for both the stadium and the master plan are putting together the concepts for formal city review and approval. So again, after that's completed, then they will submit those to the Planning Commission for review and approval. There'll be a public hearing, and then finally to the City Council. Also another public hearing opportunity. There is required environmental review. The state requires that for a stadium of this size that we need to do environmental review to look at a whole variety of topics, including traffic and parking, noise, air quality, soil and water impacts, and a host of other things. And there will be a public comment period as part of that as well. And this is the tentative timeline that we know at this point. So December through March, that's the time when the plans will be being formed. That's the time period we'll have a couple more public meetings like this one where we can get input from all of you. And then the Planning Commission review and approval process will start. Again, a public hearing at that level and also at the City Council. And as the mayor said, the goal is to be able to start the stadium construction sometime this summer. And I think Jonathan will come up and kick us off for the next phase.
We heard a little bit about sort of the outlines of what the stadium agreement will look like. We heard a little bit about the planning context of the plans that's already been done and then the process for going forward. What we want to do now is hear from you, and we've arranged 9 different topic tables. They're repeated, so you'll find 18 tables. These topics are on 2 different tables, so if it's crowded around one and you want to make a comment, you can look for the other. These are how the table topics are organized. Again, sort of picking up on the themes that you heard about from Donna and from Todd. Community use, affordable ticket program, getting there, how do you get to and from the site, jobs, green space, sustainability. There's a young people's corner if there are any kids here who want to draw or do other things. Youth, soccer, and amateur sports. And then there's a sort of a more overall vision and other topics. If you don't see your topic up there, weigh in on this 9th topic if you would. So we want to spend the next hour. I know Donna and Todd and I and others will be here if you have questions or want to provide comments directly to us. Otherwise, we invite you to visit one of the tables, and you can provide your input directly to the person at the table. You can write it down on a Post-it note. There'll also be some exercises to weigh in and help us think about these different topics. Yeah, so the 24 folks who were appointed to the Community Advisory Committee, who starts officially on Thursday, your first official act is to stand up tonight if you're here. So please do that. Thanks to everyone for volunteering their time for that. So stay up just a moment longer. If you want to provide input to someone who's not at a table, find one of these folks, because they'll be spending every free minute between now and March informing the community advisory plan. So another chance for input. Before I tell you the ways to get online with us, I want to remember to point out that Nancy Holman, standing in the back, is a great person to provide input to. She is also holding the keys that someone left at the registration table. So if that's to get to your car or your apartment when you get home, stop and get the keys from Nancy. And just finally, I think, so this is the website that we've set up for this process, stpaul.gov/midway. This is a great way to stay connected. If you leave your name out front or go through this webpage, you can sign up to get updates as the planning process goes forward. So please do that. We also have something called Online St. Paul, where we get input via online comments, and we'll be announcing questions that we're asking through this website here. So it's another way to stay informed. So with that, I want to thank you again for coming. Please do spend time around the tables here providing input, again, on these variety of topics, and stay tuned for further public meetings, and make sure that Community Advisory Committee knows your thoughts. So thanks for coming, and have a great night.